Today, we will recap a mystery thriller movie, in which people live in a top-secret town of the world, and soon find the real truth behind it. Spoilers ahead, watch out and enjoy. In the 1950s, near the California desert, there's a company town called Victory. Families there live happily, with husbands heading to work at Victory headquarters outside the town, and wives staying home for household tasks and ballet lessons taught by Shelley, their instructor. In the cheerful community of Victory, Alice and Jack are a happy couple. They have a lively and satisfying romantic relationship. They also have a special song that Alice likes to hum while doing her daily chores. Every so often, the town experiences quick tremors, leading Alice to wonder if these are linked to the activities at Victory headquarters. However, Jack always avoids answering her, and Alice doesn't push for an explanation. One afternoon, after their ballet class, Bunny and Alice chat and gossip, wondering why their friend Margaret wasn't there. Later, Alice is in her garden when she sees Margaret in her backyard. Margaret is holding a toy plane and has her eyes closed. A couple of days later, Alice attends a pool party at Shelley's house. The energetic event pauses momentarily as Shelley and her husband, Frank, who is also the CEO of Victory, stop the fun to give a warm speech to the new town residents. Unexpectedly, Margaret disrupts the speech, asking why they are there when they shouldn't be. Margaret's husband quickly leads her away, but the atmosphere turns uneasy. To lighten the mood, Frank steps in and redirects the conversation. He reminds everyone that their purpose is to build a world that emphasizes safety and order in this community they've established. Later, Alice still has concerns about Margaret and goes to find her. She discovers Margaret at home, where her husband is giving her some medication. The next day, Alice and her friends are out shopping and talking about Margaret. They note that her behavior has become strange since the incident. Bunny interrupts, reminding them that what happened wasn't just a casual occurrence. Bunny discloses that Margaret had broken a crucial rule by going far into the desert with her child, likely due to seeing something, perhaps even a hallucination. When they finally located Margaret, she was by herself, clutching her son's toy plane, while her child was missing. Margaret believes that her child was taken from her as a sort of punishment. One day, wanting to get some fresh air, Alice opts to ride the trolley. Surprisingly, a plane that looks like Margaret's toy plane appears in the sky, descending quickly until it crashes into the desert. Although the bus driver declines to take her there due to the rules, Alice is resolute about exploring. Ignoring the rules, she decides to venture on foot into the desert. Eventually, she comes across a strange dome-shaped structure and starts calling out for assistance. Alice approaches the dome with caution, tentatively touching its glass walls. Suddenly, her body trembles, making her pull her head back. She sees a succession of odd and unsettling images flashing in front of her eyes. When Alice eventually regains her composure, she's back in her own bed at home. Feeling puzzled and frightened, she goes to the kitchen, only to find Jack silently cooking in an effort not to disturb her. Alice, with no memory of the recent events, mentions the plane crash to Jack. He brushes it off, saying that if something like that had happened, everyone in town would be talking about it. The next day, as Alice cleans the windows, she's startled when the wall behind her starts moving, pushing her against the glass. She's terrified and struggles to push back, but suddenly, the wall goes back to its original position in an instant. As Alice tries to make sense of the hallucination, the phone suddenly rings. She picks it up to hear Margaret's voice on the line. Margaret asks if Alice saw what just occurred, claiming that they are being misled and need to get away. During her subsequent ballet class, Alice is startled when she sees her reflection as Margaret in the mirror. She places her hands on the glass and starts hitting her head, causing Alice to scream in terror. As Alice turns around, she notices that Margaret has disappeared. Alice hurries home, only to find Margaret standing on her roof. With tears in her eyes, Alice yells at Margaret, begging her to stop. But Margaret pays no attention and brings things to a conclusion. Soon after, a group of men dressed in red appears and forcefully takes Alice away. In the evening, Alice tries to explain the events to Jack, but he brushes it off, thinking it was just an accidental situation while she was cleaning the windows. The next morning, as Alice wraps up dinner leftovers, her hands start moving on their own, wrapping a part of her body involuntarily. After a few seconds, she regains control, unwraps herself, and takes a deep breath, reluctantly admitting that she might be losing her sanity. Soon after, Jack arrives with Dr. Collins, who's been called to examine Alice. Alice notices Collins has confidential files about Margaret in his briefcase. Collins leaves the house, accidentally leaving his briefcase behind. Once Dr. Collins and Jack are out of the house, Alice seizes the chance and quickly opens the briefcase, hoping to find some hints. Sadly, all the pages are entirely blackened, hiding any potential information. A few days later, Jack organizes a dinner party at their place, inviting both Frank and Shelley. While Alice is busy preparing the meal, Frank approaches her and shares his intrigue. He mentions how he's always wanted someone who can challenge him. At dinner, Alice interrupts the discussion to inquire about the guests' lives before they came to the town, pointing out how the same few backstories repeat among all the neighbors. Frank remains composed, and reveals that Alice is experiencing the same mental state as Margaret. He goes so far as to accuse her of being in his bedroom. Alice is furious, and her anger flares even more when Jack comes back after seeing their guests off. He accuses her of trying to spoil his important evening. Alice promptly confronts him, swearing that wasn't her intention. She emphasizes how much Jack means to her, and stresses the urgency of leaving Victory before it ruins their relationship. Eventually, Jack relents and agrees to escape with Alice. They quickly gather their necessary items and pack before getting into the car together. However, just as they are about to leave, Jack surprises Alice by unexpectedly apologizing. Confused and bewildered by Jack's sudden change, Alice's confusion deepens when the men in red suddenly appear. They forcibly take hold of her, dragging her away while Jack watches helplessly, tears streaming down his face as he hears his wife's desperate cries for help. Alice finds herself at the hospital, subjected to electroshock therapy. During this process, she starts having visions of the couple once more. In these visions, she understands that it's herself and Jack, living in modern times and humming that familiar song. Jack, facing unemployment, receives comfort from Alice. She promises to work extra shifts at the hospital where she serves as a doctor. But the burden of working long hours starts wearing on Alice. When she returns home after a tiring day, drained from her double shifts, Jack's failure to have dinner ready, and his apparent lack of understanding about her exhaustion add to her disappointment. Tensions escalate as Jack feels hurt when Alice is too exhausted for intimacy. As the night goes on, Jack finds comfort by listening to Frank's podcast. After a while, Alice awakens once more in the Victory Hospital. Dr. Collins informs her that she is now all good, and sends her back to the town, where she resumes her former routine. Days pass by uneventfully until one evening when Jack returns home, humming the irritating song. It's then revealed that Jack from Alice's visions is real. He's applied to join the Victory Project, where he can live a flawless life. This decision has given him access to a unique machine, kept at home, through which Alice is linked. Her existence in Victory is actually a simulation. This holds true for all the wives in the town. All the husbands, including Jack, connect to this machine for a few hours daily, before disconnecting upon entering the desert headquarters. For the remaining hours, he takes care of Alice's actual body, working a low-paying job to afford the machine's cost. Meanwhile, in Victory, Alice falls to the ground overwhelmed by the new insights flooding her mind. She confronts Jack, seeking an explanation. Jack grows defensive, and shouts that he did it to offer them a flawless life since they were unhappy before. Eventually, Jack kneels and pleads for forgiveness. Frustrated by his deceit, Alice seizes a glass and strikes Jack, rendering him unconscious. Unbeknownst to her, dying within the Victory simulation results in real-life death. As the real Jack's eyes close, Frank receives a phone call informing him of the situation. Just then, Bunny enters the house, drawn by the sounds. Alice attempts to explain, but Bunny confesses she's aware. She also opts for the simulation, as it's the sole way she can be reunited with her deceased children in some form. Bunny instructs Alice that she needs to head to the headquarters and disconnect herself. Terrified but compelled, Alice follows Bunny's guidance. She realizes that her neighbors have also gathered there. As street lights start to burst, the women sense something amiss, but the men are preoccupied with inquiries about Jack and attempt to halt Alice's actions. Cornered by those around her, Alice takes swift action and maneuvers the car, causing Collins and the others to crash. With the call on speaker, Frank learns about Collins' demise at home, and Shelley also overhears the situation. As Frank is preoccupied with giving orders, Shelley approaches and stabs him, declaring it's her turn now. As Alice arrives at the desert dome, she has a vision of Jack embracing her, urging her to remain, and she reminisces about their shared experiences in reality. The men in red emerge behind her. She hurries to the wall and touches the glass, tilting her head back as unsettling images and her real memories flood back. In a climactic moment, everything goes dark, and Alice gasps, bringing the film to a close with this intense scene.